Hey guys, Saeed here, certified Kubernetes enthusiast and a senior DevOps engineer by day. This session's aimed to take you guys through how to set up a Kafka environment and deploy it on Kubernetes. It will be very, very straightforward and very, very simple. So right off the bat, what we're planning to do here is we've got a pre-created Docker file and a number of scripts and a server properties. That will be predominantly for the Kafka images. I'll take you guys through that and what that looks like. And then part two will basically be, part one will comprise of building that image and pushing it up to Docker Hub. And then part two will be more of the Kubernetes side of things. So we've got some Kafka, of course, on Docker, and then followed by a deployment on Kubernetes. The Kubernetes section will comprise of creating a namespace and, of course, deploying a pod or two pods, a Zookeeper pod and a Kafka broker. So we're going to have that Zookeeper pod effectively producing messages and consuming from the broker. And we could do vice versa, although it probably wouldn't be the best setup in production. So, of course, console the documentation for that purpose. This is more aimed to be a practical sort of hands-on. So without further ado, let's crack on. So I've got my my terminal set up here. I've got tmux. I've got multi sort of multi-tab or whatever you like it, to call it. So off the bat, so if I cd into my documents here and aim to actually look inside there, yeah, we've got our home lab repo. I'll be sure to share all of the relevant links to the GitHub link where you'll be able to find and check in on it on the source code and the likes. So yeah, we head over to Kafka. So now if we just check inside, we've got the Kafka directory and then we've got the Zookeeper directory. So let's kick off by actually running it on or running the Zookeeper container, or building out the Zookeeper image rather. So let's cd into the Zookeeper image and let's actually look at what is going on in that Docker file. So initially we start off with the base image, which is an open JDK, JRE Buster. Kafka's obviously built on Java, so that would be our base image. We've got a few environment variables that we've set up, right? And a directory we've set up for Kafka, a temp directory, where we'll also be updating and installing the package manager apt-get. We're also running a curl command that will be pulling in that distro for Kafka with the relevant versions given in the environment variables. We've got a number of different extra parts. So for example, this is a custom script that I created just for this project. We'll be looking at that next. That script will be running effectively and it will be sourced to the bash rc file of that container, such that those commands will be able to be called anywhere within that container. So we'll shortly see what that looks like. We've also got the start Zookeeper script, in which we're also granting executable rights to, just there, and then we run the command Zookeeper. So fairly straightforward. Now let's take a little look at that script, that custom script, and that script comprises of a few parameters. Here you can see we're able to actually set up that create topic rather, where we call the Kafka topic script in the Kafka binaries folder, where we're creating, calling that Zookeeper container, which will expose to port 2181. We've got a replication factor of 1, partition set to 3, and the topic will be $1, such that when we run that create topics command, will effectively pass a topic's name, and so on and so forth. We've got the same thing going for a number of different functionalities, like describing the topic, listing the topic. We're actually be able to get the topic config, as well as deleting the topic and consuming messages from that topic. So let's just quickly make sure that the Docker file isn't actually in, or rather I should have had ls there. Yeah, let's just quickly remove this old image, Docker RMI. This is a Kafka one. I was just playing around with it about 10 minutes ago, just making sure that there's no breaking anything that was going to break, making sure that it's all ready for you guys. Lovely, cool. So we're going to go ahead and build out that image. Docker build dot. That dot implies that the Docker file that's within the current directory, and we'll pass a tag and to the registry or the repository of Saeed F, which is myself, who is myself, of course, and we'll give that the name Zookeeper. And just for isolation, we'll just say YT, meaning YouTube, given that the latest version, right? And that will build out from scratch. Simultaneously, we've obviously got tmux, so we're able to do a number of different things at the same time. We'll just head over to that same repo and get to that labs, into data and into Kafka. And we'll do the same thing for that Kafka. Again, very, very similarly, we've got exactly the same kind of setup going on. If it's going to allow me to open it, yeah, there you go. I don't have to do that. So if I head right to the top, except here we've got just a few different parameters. I mean, effectively the first part's all the same. We've just got a number of different environment variables. For ease of configuration, I've just hard coded that IP address. Of course, in production or in any environment, you'd want to, maybe give it a host name such that, you're able to, just make sure that you cover all your grounds. We've also got an extra parameter here, other than, the server properties. The Zookeeper pod didn't have it. It was already sort of baked in. But here we're actually overriding the out of the box server properties provided by Kafka, and we've got our own server properties. If we look at the server properties, we'll be able to see it here, where we're only going to have one broker, and this broker will have the broker ID 1. And if we head over to the Zookeeper config or the Zookeeper connect section, we'll also see that that's hard coded there, as you can see, with that static IP address and that. But what we'll do is now that we've built out that Zookeeper pod, what we'll do, the Zookeeper container, we'll do docker image ls, and we've got that Zookeeper container. Now what we could do, we could effectively head over to our, before we do that, what we'll do is we'll push this up. So we'll do docker push, and we'll just pass that image name, right? Docker push, and this will go over to our Docker Hub, and we'll just pass that tag to the end of it. Cool. Once that builds up, now that's pretty straightforward. Once we get that Zookeeper pod going, we've already got our Kubernetes namespace, our Kubernetes environment set up. Get pods. We've got a Kubernetes pod running. What we'll do is, and K again is an alias. I've got a number of different aliases going at the moment. So it's fairly new environment. This is my Raspberry Pi that you're looking at the moment. That will be the host. So now that image, as you can see, has been pushed up to the Docker Hub. So now we can pull it down. But before we do that, what we want to do is we want to super quickly build a Kubernetes, or create or deploy a Kubernetes namespace such that we can isolate our work. I've got a number of different Kubernetes namespaces. If I do kget ns, ns is the shorthand for namespaces. I've got one for Splunk, Kafka, and a whole load of other default ones that were created with the spin up of this cluster. The Kafka one, we'll leave that. That's my personal one. We'll create a new one, Kafka or K. I'll use the kubectl command just such that I don't confuse anyone. But we've got the K again is the same. So if I again hit alias and then do K, you can see here this is just a shorthand for us. Every time I'm writing K, just think kubectl. So here we go. K create ns, ns being namespace, and then we could just name this Kafka -yt, yt being YouTube. Okay, we've got the Kafka namespace set up. So if we do K get namespaces, simply we've got our Kafka -yt. That will be where our workload will effectively go. So now if I do K run being the command to create a quick pod. So run, and then we'll name this Zookeeper, right? And we'll pass the image because we've already got our image up in the Docker Hub, and we've given it this tag, this name with the effective tag. We'll just take that name, copy that over, and then we'll give it an equal sign, paste the name here. Oh, if it pastes correctly, my apologies. So I'll just take all of the extra stuff out of that, and then we hit that. Now, I can't remember. I don't think there's any other tags that are required. We're going to create a service for it such that we could expose it to this port, because of course the broker will need to communicate with the Zookeeper pod. So yeah, we'll just, one more parameter being the namespace, the Kafka YT namespace. So once we hit that, the pod's been created. So we do k get pods in that namespace being that Kafka YT. Okay, and that container is created. So what we're going to do, we're going to have an isolated terminal here. Once we SSH into it, just on the bottom right, we're going to basically be watching our Kafka Zookeeper pod building up. So if I do k get pods in that namespace being the Kafka one, and then we'll just set hash or dash w being to effectively watch it live. We'll just, what's going on here? This is the old, sorry, my apologies. Kafka being Kafka dash YT was the new one, and then dash W. There we go. And that Zookeeper pod is now running. So now that that's running, what we want to do, we'll leave that to stay watching, right? And we won't have to touch that for now. Any changes to our pod, we'll be able to basically stream in that information live at the bottom right corner. So now that that Kafka pod is up and running, what we want to do is basically expose that pod to a port, or expose the port of that pod. Okay, and the way we do that is we use k expose pod. Okay, and we're going to tell it the namespace being YT, and then the port, if I remember it correctly, being the target port. We'll just snatch that. Yeah, let's say dash target dash port being 2181. Okay, once we hit that, oh, we haven't specified the name of the pod, of course, but that name of the pod is Zookeeper. Couldn't find it. Cool, that's fine. I think target port is the incorrect flag. Change that to port. There we go. Lovely. Cool. So now we could check the services for that pod. And if we check the SVC being short for service, Kafka YT, there we go. We've got our Kafka Zookeeper pod rather, and that has now has a static IP address which is clustered, which is accessible on a cluster wide or cluster scope, and the port, as we've obviously exposed, is TCP 2181. So what we're going to need to do before we actually build out that Kafka image, because remember we still need to create our Kafka broker, what we're going to do is effectively just quickly run an edit on that Kafka server properties, where we have the Zookeeper, if I could spell Zookeeper correctly. There we go. And we'll just edit this super quickly and just give it that static IP address. Again, you could follow along. I mean, probably look back onto this if I'm moving too fast, but yeah, this probably isn't the best. Again, it's prone to human error, having to run it, you know, on sort of a manual basis, the way I'm running it. But generally you'd have, you know, things in place like scripts and the likes. But yeah, we're just building this out from like sort of semi scratch, not exactly scratch, but I mean, this is as close as it will get for now anyway. But yeah, I wouldn't advise doing this again at work. I'd probably say it wouldn't be safe, of course, for a number of different reasons, from a security standpoint and the likes. But of course, I'll be downscaling all of this effectively, and that is one of the benefits of Kubernetes and, you know, containers. Cool. So we've got our server properties set up and fine. Now, if we go to our Docker file, I've got the old, or the, you know, the previous Zookeeper IP addresses. We've got a new Zookeeper IP address, so I'm just going to pass that as the environment variables. So it was 10.43.137.149, and we'll just mundane. I may speed this bit up, or you could sit through it super quickly while I change this IP address, the static IP address. Cool. Do the same thing for the port TCP. It's 10.43.137.149. And then finally, the last one, excuse the sore throat. It's quite late here, and I haven't got any water next to me, so hopefully I'll be super speedy through this. By the way, seeing if you made it this far, you seem to be interested in what I'm doing at the moment, feel free to subscribe, like, and also share ideas if you have any thoughts for any new videos that you'd like to see from myself. So I'm just going to quickly validate and verify, seeing as I did this manually, prone to human error, of course. 10.43.137.149. Yep, looks good to me. We may have to come back to that if I've made any mistakes. So now that I'm happy with that, just ls super quickly. I'm going to quickly grep r, and then I'm going to grep for Zookeeper. If there is any references to it, of course there are a number of different references, but just triple checking and making sure that there isn't any previous or legacy IP addresses. Hey guys, and welcome to the fully transparent DevOps channel where we don't crop and chop our labs. This section here, I've fast forwarded it. I could have cut it out, but I'd like to show you guys what went wrong. Because I manually import, or I manually change the configurations to sort of point to the IP address, the static IP address for the Zookeeper pod, what happened was it didn't change. So you can see, if you slow it down a little bit, what you'll basically see is me building out the image on the top right and effectively referencing it back over into our Kubernetes pod. And then the Kubernetes pod started throwing some exceptions, and those exceptions were effectively that it was still calling the older IP addresses. So the change didn't obviously stick, which is again one of the other reasons why you should use host names, such that you can call it dynamically and not have to hard code IP addresses all the time. So that's the reason why I fast forwarded this part. Now I'm going to come back into the correction. So this is me correcting it and then rebuilding that image with a different name. So hope you guys enjoy it. And yeah, Docker images. Okay. ls. I don't know if that will pop up. It probably won't. Cool. So we'll just give this a new name. So we'll do docker build dot, again in the same directory, -t site f, and then what we'll do is we'll specify the name of that. We'll do Kafka A-YT, just so we've got that separation of interest between the two containers or the two images, such that when we build it, there isn't cross-contamination. Sometimes that spews over in Docker for some reason. So we're going to build that. It should be super quick because it's already cached a few of the steps. And then here, mind me, cool. While that builds, what we'll do is we'll just prepare the running of that. This will be -a-yt. That'll be the image name. And then we'll just create a new image the second we get that success. And then once we get the success, we'll quickly push that image up to the container registry or the Docker Hub, and then we'll be able to reference it in our pod. And then we'll see what happens there. Should work in theory, but sometimes again, in DevOps, in the practice of platform engineering, you always come to blockers and issues. But yeah, it's all good. Push side f Kafka -a-yt latest. Yep. And now that should push. Once that pushes and we get a success, we'll be able to reference it directly in our pod to the bottom right. And this is what I like about tmux, because it really does push that productivity within your environments. You're able to do a lot more things super quick. And yeah, now that that's pushed instantaneously, I'm going to create my Kafka pod, and on the left side we're going to be streaming that. So while that happens, what we'll do here, we'll just clean our screens and we'll see what that has to say. So in the meantime, we'll wait for it to kick off, start running, and we'll also be looking at the logs of that container. So for now, looks good. It doesn't look like it's good. So now you can see here, if I go to the bottom right, I said, if I have a look at the Zookeeper pod or Zookeeper service, I can see the new IP address is being referenced there, which is a good sign. So in the meantime, that should solve the old issue, unless we come with a new problem, but we'll just have to wait and see. So if I refresh the logs, doesn't look like anything's broken. It looks all good to me so far. So I'm just going to go ahead and expose that Kafka pod, right? Hey guys, so I've decided to actually split the video up in half. It was initially a one video 40 minutes long. Click anywhere on the screen or check the description for part 2, where we go deeper into the configuration between the Kafka broker and the Zookeeper pod. And we also go into actually the intricacies of Kafka, looking at how we produce and consume messages, as well as create topics and list them from the respective brokers.